but we thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and go through our NWSL Challenge Cup power rankings. We've been going through these a little bit. We did some power rankings really, really early on for the general season back in December of 2021. And it was fun to do those because they were a little maybe all over the place, right? Because we were doing them ahead of a transfer window. We were doing them ahead of like a lot of major moves being announced or being made. You can also find power rankings weekly at cbssports.com and take a look at some rankings and where teams are fluctuating after match weeks happen, with a little bit of analysis and whipped up in there as well. Let's go through our previous rankings and then we'll go through the new rankings. Lisa, you want to hit us with what we had going into Challenge Cup?
I do. I'm going to start at the bottom. So we'll start with 12 teams in the league. Number 12, we had Orlando Pride. 11th, Racing Louisville. 10, San Diego Wave FC. Number 9, Angel City. 8, North Carolina Courage. 7, Chicago Red Stars. 6, Houston. 5, Kansas City Current, old expansion club, moving up the ranks. 4, New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC. 3rd, Portland Thorns. 2nd, OL Reign, and reigning champs as number 1 in Washington Spirit. That's what we put out in December. So this is before a lot of the moves were made, before a lot of the transfers were happening. Even before, I believe, the expansion draft that happened, we put out these initial rankings, kind of looking at rosters and what could have come. And it's very interesting because our new power rankings after week 1 of Challenge Cup, very different from this, very different, because now we got a taste of what these teams are bringing this year. And some of it's a little surprising, especially Washington, ranked as number 1 as the reigning NWSL champions. Not so much anymore.
Yeah, it's funny what happens after like a week of matches take place and you go back into your power rankings and have to dig up your Google Doc and have to rearrange everything. Or is that just me having to write them up on CBS Sports? Because let me tell you, that's exactly what happened to me when I was like watching the matches take place. That was something lingering in the back of my head. It was like moving in my brain. I was like, well, this team's going to be here. This team's going to be there. I mean, maybe just to throw out some talking points a little bit. I mean, it was we went with some of the obvious, narratives around the team, right? For example, in a team with Washington Spirit, they're the reigning 2021 NWSL championships. They're a team that retained a large amount of their previous championship roster. Everything about that, right, sort of signals like, hey, this is the team with the target on their back, keeping him at number 1, versus maybe a team, if we're looking at the bottom of this ranking at Orlando Pride, going through a massive rebuild, introducing a number of new faces, right? Not just on the player side, but the head coaching side as well with Amanda Cromwell. And there's just a lot there that signal like, hey, this is going to be maybe a little bit of a journey, a little bit of a process, right, for Orlando Pride. And that's something like that where we're going to put them towards the bottom. But then when we have matches come into play, it sort of shakes things out a little bit differently. Let's go through these new rankings. I'm going to rattle them off from everyone. I'm going to do like Lisa did too. I'm going to start at the bottom. We'll start with number 12. So this is where the power rankings lie this week. At number 12, we've got Gotham FC. At number 11, we've got Houston Dash. Number 10, Orlando Pride. Number 9, Washington Spirit. At number 8, Racing Louisville FC. At number 7, Kansas City Current. At number 6, San Diego Wave FC. At number 5, Angel City. At number 4, Portland Thorns. At number 3, OL Reign. At number 2, Chicago Red Stars. And at number 1, North Carolina Courage. Lisa, I got to tell you, when I had to sit there and rattle these off and be able to file them for the public, right, to go ahead and take a look at and see, there were a number of things that I was looking at for teams over the weekend, because something that we started this segment out with, right, when I was chatting a little bit about it and introducing it, was that there were a lot of draws that took place this week. So maybe some teams that kind of would be nestled in the middle, but like how they would be ranked, right? When we're looking at our new rankings for this week, is there anything that you're looking at that stands out? Anything that you disagree with on my end, or maybe that you would shift around a little bit?
Yeah, I think these are pretty good. It's definitely hard. And obviously with results, only 2 teams walking away with 3 points and getting a win in North Carolina Courage and Chicago. They're at the top of these power rankings. I actually was Very impressed with North Carolina and what they pulled out. So they are well deserving of that number 1 power ranking spot. I think Chicago, although they got the win, there was definitely some hiccups. So number 2 there, based on like the 2 teams that got a win, I like how that shook out.
Yeah.
And then when you, as you mentioned, you look at all of the ties that happened. Of course, Gotham and Houston, they were on the losing end of the North Carolina Chicago matches. So they are at the bottom of the table. And I really wasn't that impressed with what we saw from Gotham. I think Houston had pieces there to build a puzzle. And maybe if they snuck away with the tie, they would have been a lot higher in this power rankings. But the fact that they lost 3-1 to Chicago, it was almost like Chicago looked a lot better than them, but also Houston fell apart at moments. So definitely deserving of that 11th power ranking spot. And then all the rest in the middle, a bunch of draws across the board here for them. There is some that I think OL Reign, well deserving of that number 3 spot. They played a very good game. They are a very talented group of individuals that can come together and play as a group. But between Angel City and San Diego, number 5, you have Angel City, and then San Diego at number 6 in these rankings. I would argue that San Diego is actually better than Angel City FC. The game was a little bit mismatched, I'm going to say, or it was lopsided all over the place because of player personnel. It was their first time playing. And as the game went on, I think we saw greater progression from San Diego Wave in how they kept the ball, how they passed, how they broke down Angel City. Whereas Angel City, they started hotter than San Diego, but they did not improve as much as San Diego did. So if we're looking at like a graphic chart, which I'm a pretty visual person, Angel City starts higher than San Diego Wave, but as the game goes on, I think San Diego Wave ends higher than Angel City. So because of that, and looking at the rest of the Challenge Cup to come, I'd put San Diego higher because they got better throughout 90 minutes and they didn't even have all of their power on the field at one point. Can you imagine when they do?
I respect it, honestly.
That's one that I would argue about.
Yeah, I think that's a totally fair statement to make. I think when we're coming off of a weekend like we just had, when there were a number of draws over the 6 matches, when you're getting into that sort of 5 through 8, 5 through 9 kind of ranking, you're can make a case, right, for anyone to be maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower. That's a fun thing when it comes to power rankings, right? I put San Diego Wave at 6, putting them right under Angel City because I think that was kind of a toss up for me, right? It was a pretty entertaining game. And I think we can both agree that, especially during that first half, it was very much like a just get out there and run kind of vibe. Like everything was like, what's a midfield? Like, what's going on? Like, who cares? It doesn't exist. Like, let's go, right? But I think like going back and taking a deeper dive into the numbers of the match, right? Kind of you make that comparison, right, to your eye test, right? We all saw from these two teams, we all had a lot of fun watching the game, right? And sort of seeing these two new teams come together, come to life out on the pitch. But seeing how active the Wave were, right, in those moments in the final third, and to just only walk away with a goal, I was like, oh gosh, that's a bummer. And a lot of the arguments are going to be made for all 12 of these teams, right? In terms of like, hey, it's match day 1. We're coming right out of preseason. There's going to be some things that we got to clean up, right?
Of course.
We understand that, but it's also our job to talk about the opportunities that were missed. And we're looking at it, and you're talking about being so active in the final third, recording 23 crosses, right, over the course of the match, and just really only walking away with the one goal that ends up coming off of a set piece, of all things. It took a moment of being settled for this team to finally kind of find, the breakthrough a little bit. So it was for that argument. I was like, you know what? I'm going to like put them at 6 because I just would have liked to have maybe seen one of these teams walk away or like steal or sneak a win. And when you're just sort of seeing all of that activity and not the final punch, right? I just had to pump them a little lower.
I understand. I like the case for your argument. I still put San Diego at 5. I also, the other draw that we saw between Washington and Orlando, and for my power rankings right now, I'm looking at the games that they just played. Hence my argument for San Diego. They got better throughout the match. The last 10 minutes, they were way better than Angel City. all of that. So between Washington and Orlando, Washington Spirit, who we originally dubbed as number 1, and Orlando at number 12, literally the top of our power rankings and the bottom of our power rankings, faced off. And it was not a 1v12 game. That is not at all what we saw. I was a little disappointed in what we did not get from Washington Spirit in their cohesiveness of having the same starting lineup that they had in the second half of the championship. It did not look like that. They weren't on the same page. It was a lot of individual talent and individual skill that didn't work together. Whereas Orlando, maybe not as talented individuals comparatively to Washington Spirit, but Washington worked a lot better together. Defensively, I was very, very impressed with Erin McLeod and what she did in goal for Orlando Pride. Phenomenal game for them. So because of that, I would have put Orlando higher than Washington on these power rankings. Orlando at number 9 and Washington at number 10, just because I think Orlando outplayed them. Coming in a scoreless draw against the reigning NWSL champions, I think that's pretty good considering you finished as bottom of the table, second to last in that year. In year 2021 was Orlando Pride. So because of that, I'd put them higher in that matchup. I think Orlando outplayed them. Now, as the power rankings go, I think Washington will figure it out, and later down, Orlando still might struggle a little bit, but based on week 1 in the Challenge Cup, Orlando outplayed and outperformed Washington in my book.
Yeah, I hear that. I don't think that's unfair at all. I mean, doing the flip on that. I had Washington Spirit at number 9, and I think maybe the argument that I used was the combined total shots on goal to give them, the higher ranking, but maybe like you're convincing me, maybe I should have put him at number 10 because of that, because they just sort of we saw it and we talked about it on the recap a little bit. They just I didn't have any answers, right, for the physical play that they were receiving from Orlando Pride and right. And the fact that you had an attacking core that consists of, Ashley Hatch, Ashley Sanchez, Trinity Rodman, Tara McCown. I'm gonna include her in that as well, right? These 4 players combined for a total 4 shots on goal in a scoreless draw. If anything screams like first game out of preseason, like maybe it was this one, right? So maybe that is an argument where it's like, maybe we could do it, but I don't know. I just want to see a little bit more from Orlando. I just don't think something like a physical choppy first game can be a substitute for tactics to eventually be the end all be all for whether they get a result or not. It was a choppy first game though, which is why I think I knew of all the draws that these 2 teams were going to be somewhere in my 9 or 10 ranking, just because of the scoreless draw and just because of the very physical game it was. Before we transition out, I do want to ask you something else though.
I have one more question or one more point to make about Washington and Orlando. If you go in blind and you watch that first match between them, I think Orlando outplayed them in areas of the pitch. However, going in with all of the information that we have on these teams, because you and I are pretty well informed about the clubs, the personnel, the years that they've had before, and the history of these clubs, thinking that Washington was maybe going to come out and win this match against Orlando. And the fact that they didn't, that's another reason that I would have flipped them, because I had Washington winning this one against Orlando. And the fact that they got a scoreless draw, that proved to me that Orlando was the better team in that one, just looking at all of the factors coming into it.
I like it. Keep that energy, because I want to ask you one more about these power rankings before we transition out of them. We talked about the top of the table a little bit, like, hey, there were 2 teams that got wins this weekend. They're going to go 1 or 2 automatically based on their play. We talked a little bit about some teams that walked away with draws this weekend and talked about the middle kind of portion of this power rankings table. But I want to ask you about these bottom 2 teams, the 2 teams that walked away with losses in Houston Dash and New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC. We got them at 11 and 12, right? So for myself, it was kind of just an easy way to sort of go back and look at their games and know that these 2 teams are going to end up in the bottom of these power rankings. They're the only 2 teams that weren't able to walk away without a result from the weekend. But in terms of form, right, Gotham FC got placed at number 12 for me, because not only are they the only team to fail to record a result, they failed to record a goal in this first weekend of matches. So when you're looking at 11 and 12, what are some things that you want to see out of these 2 teams moving forward? Maybe try to jump back up into the power rankings.
I agree 100%. Gotham didn't get a goal. They deserve to be at the bottom. It's also almost a similar argument with Washington Spirit. They have a lot of firepower up top that has played together before at Gotham. So because of that, they should have been able to combine and do something. Whereas Houston, they had some new faces coming in there. They had Maria Sanchez coming in and just different personnel all over the pitch, a lot of rookies as well. So for Houston and Gotham, I think Gotham, in order to jump the power rankings and get higher on this one, they have to score goals and get shots and get opportunities, which is what we did not see. So it starts on that end of it. I think defensively, Gotham will be okay. They have Allie and Ashlyn Harris and Ali Krieger in the back line. They have Mandy Friedman. They have Imani Dorsey. They have Caprice Didasco. They have a solid defense. They need to score goals, though. You cannot rely on your defense to get shutouts if you're not putting up any goals on the board. For Houston, I don't think they have that problem as much. I think defensively, they broke down and they had mental lapses against Chicago in that match and against Mallory Pugh, to be frank, in that match. But other than that, I think defensively, Houston is going to be okay. They're fine. And attacking wise, they can score goals. We saw that. I think that Alyssa Nair had a really good game in goal for Chicago against Houston, and Rachel Daly could have had one or two of the shots that she took. So for Houston, I think they have to be more on the same page the entire match. They can't try one thing and then switch to another. Find something that works, stick with it, and continue to do that. They were flopping all over the place with Chicago and let Chicago dictate that match. And for Gotham, they have to score. They have to get on the board. They have to get multiple goals and not rely on their defense to win them games.
I like it. I love it. Let us know if you agree or disagree with the power rankings that we've listed. We always like to open things up, right, and sort of hear feedback from our awesome audience and listeners.